From Oklahoma.
Mr. President, for about 20 years now, I've viewed the development and deployment of a layered ballistic missile defense shield as probably singularly the most vital thing that we could be doing around here. Adversaries like North Korea, people are aware of that now, adversaries and others have ballistic missiles. They're increasing in range, capability. Iran is getting almost everything. One of the problems that you have is you get countries like North Korea developing capabilities, missile capabilities, and if they have it, then other adversaries have it. I mean, I'm talking about Yemen, all the rest of them. So anyway, it's important for us to communicate to the American people that the threat that we face is probably the most imminent threat that we've had in the history of this country. It's today, I think it's the greatest threat that we've had, certainly in my lifetime. Now, I've spoken on the floor on this issue in 2001, 2009, 2012, and this will be the fourth time this year. Over the last 30 years, we've witnessed the missile defense programs go through the dramatic investment periods followed by extreme starvation and cancellations. Now, I'm talking about here in the United States, depending on who happens to be president at the time. We remember back, of course, when Reagan came in and people made fun of him and said Star Wars and tried to defame him in any way that they could. And yet he was able to be persistent and start on a program that ended up, we should be very thankful that we have today. Now, that was followed in 1989 by President Bush. He continued that program. However, when President Clinton came in 1993, the first thing he did was cut $2.5 billion out of the Bush missile defense budget request for the fiscal year of 1994. He also terminated the Reagan-Bush Strategic Defense Initiative and downgraded the National Missile Defense to a research and development program. He cut five-year missile defense funding by 54%, from $39 billion to $18 billion. Now, I say this because these times are changing. Now, to continue with his administration in 1996, he cut the funding and slowed down the development of the THAAD and the Navy theater-wide systems. Now, the THAAD system, to remind ourselves of how important that was back in that time and the cut that he made in that, how critical that was. THAAD right now is about the only thing that we've been able to join forces with South Korea and be able to knock down something coming from North Korea to South Korea. And the Aegis system is one of the few things that could be a defensive system that we could share with Japan. And so without these systems, they would be wide open. Now, that was 1996. Then in 1999, the last of the Clinton years, he delayed by at least 2 years what they call the space-based infrared system, which is a very complicated system that knocks down incoming missiles. Anyway, then Bush 2000 came in. By the end of 2008, President Bush had succeeded in fielding a missile defense system capable of defending all 50 states. Now, one of the things he did that was most significant, and this is in the final years of his administration, was recognize the fact that we have had ground-based interceptors in our country for a number of years. In fact, there are 44 ground-based interceptor systems. Unfortunately, they're all on the West Coast because that's what we thought the threat would be. So now we know that the threat, we discovered at that time during the Bush administration that the threat was from both sides because we recognized that Iran was developing the capability as well as North Korea and others. So in order to protect eastern United States as well as Central Europe, we had this system that was set up. And it was kind of funny because I remember being over there with one of our strongest allies. The system that they set up was one where they had a radar system in the Czech Republic, and they had a rocket system, a ground-based interceptor in Poland, right next door. And I remember when Václav Klaus was the president of the Czech Republic, one of our strongest supporters, he said to me at that time, now, if we go ahead and put our system in the Czech Republic and in Poland, can you assure me that if we incur the wrath of Russia, that we're not going to end up being able to being embarrassed and have the rug pulled out from under us? And I said, there's not a chance in the world that that would happen. Well, that did happen. In fact, it was a total of the 44 ground-based interceptors were actually fielded. That was in Alaska and California on the West Coast. So we went through this thing where they pulled the rug out from under the Poland as well as the Czech Republic. And then in April came our first Obama defense cuts, which began disarming America and dismantling our layered missile defense system. Now, this is critical because we had put this in for the reason that we perceived the threat to be coming in from the east as opposed to the West Coast. And the very system that would have protected us was taken down by President Obama. So I'd say due to his overall reduced budget requests in defense, there were not enough Aegis ships, and I've already mentioned how we're using those today in defense of many of our allies, including Japan. And since Kim Jong-un took power in 2009, he's already conducted more than 80 ballistic missile tests. That's far more than his father and his grandfather had conducted. North Korea has conducted 6 nuclear tests of increasingly powerful weapons, the latest test being September of this year. Now, the major test actually came after that, and that was the one that was on November 28th. On November 28th, he demonstrated that he had the range of the United States in the central part of our country. In other words, it was stated by others observing that he now has the capability of reaching any target in mainland United States. There was some scientists did an analysis of what they did on the 28th of November, and they made it very clear. David Wright, who's an analyst for the Union of Concerned Scientists, wrote, yesterday's, and this is something that happened on the 29th of November, he said, yesterday's test indicates that North Korea can now hold the United States well within missile range. And so he said, further quoting, he said, such a missile would have more than enough range to reach Washington, D.C., or in fact, any other part of the United States. Now, here's the scary part of this. Because those who are not wanting to believe that the threat is real and the threat is there are saying, well, we don't know that that missile that he demonstrated on the 28th of November could have reached that range if it had had a full payload, a load of a nuclear warhead. Well, we don't know whether they had one or not, but that doesn't give me much comfort. They also questioned whether or not it could sustain the re-entry back into the atmosphere. The point is they now have that capability, and that's something that we have to keep in mind as we're making decisions, because we got decisions to make. That's what we're doing right now in trying to decide how we're going to keep government from shutting down and develop some kind of a budget or a plan that is going to serve us well. So let me just mention another thing that I think is very significant, because I heard today a lot of people talking about criticize and not really understanding what happened with the tax plan that was passed. And already we're getting the results of it. It's kind of exciting to think. I don't recall anything in my career where we got the results as quickly as we're getting right now. And we heard all the minority leader Schumer say he called the tax plan a punch in the gut of the middle class. In an op-ed piece in New York Times, Senator Elizabeth Warren and Senator Bernie Sanders said, and this is a quote, they said, the Republican agenda on health care and taxes is widely disliked by the American people and a tax giveaway to the wealthy. Well, I think it's important that people understand that not only is middle-class America going to benefit from this, they already have. 1 million Americans are counting on receiving raises and bonuses from this tax reform. Now, in my state of Oklahoma, thousands of employees will be receiving and have already received large compensation increases, bonuses. The Aon Corporation of Tulsa the express employment professionals in Oklahoma City, American Airlines, Southwest Airlines, AT&T. In fact, this is happening all together. Senator Roy Blunt was coming back on a plane, same one I was on, and the flight attendant was talking about she'd already received a $1,000 bonus. And then the rest of them chimed in and said, well, we have too. So that's already happening. Right now, we have a list of 123 major corporations that have already given an average of $1,000 per every employee that they have, predicated on the assumption that the tax plan is going to increase the economy, and that is exactly what's going to happen. So I'm really confident that this is actually happening today. And I have to say this, though, because more people still try to say, well, we can't give the tax reductions to people and still increase revenue to do all these things we need to do with our national defense and with our infrastructure programs. And that's not true. And I'm going to repeat one that I have done before on this, but people seem to not understand. And it's easy to say, well, if you reduce taxes, you're going to reduce revenue, and that isn't the way it works. And I remember very well what happened. I was not in this position, of course, but in 1981, when Ronald Reagan was president, at that time, he had the most far-reaching reduction in taxes. Remember, the top rate was reduced from 70% to 30%, and the other brackets came down proportionally. And yet, at the time that he did that, 1981, the total amount of revenue coming into the United States was $469 billion. And as a result of that, that increased revenue to $750 billion. Well, that's incredibly, that's a huge thing, and that shows that it really happened. And the reason it happens is for each 1% increase in the economy, that produces revenue of increased revenue of some $3 trillion. So that's what happened then. That's what's going to happen now. People are rejoicing today, and I ask unanimous consent that the sheet that I have that outlines all these companies that are giving large bonuses as a result of the tax bill be made a part of the record at the conclusion of my remarks.
Without objection.
Thank you very much. Now I yield the floor.